Welcome to Sports Lodge Sports Psychology Podcast. My name is Karolis Stasiūnas, and today I have very special friend and a brother of the tribe, Isaac Bezzina. Welcome, Isaac.
Hi, Karolis. It's great to be with you on this podcast. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure for me, my friend. And I want to shortly introduce Isaac, and he will introduce more about himself. So Isaac is a professional judo athlete. He is a multi-international winner of the competitions, and was qualifying for Olympics as well recently.
Yeah. So up until May last year, I was 3.5 years on the qualification circuit for the Olympic Games. So, yeah.
Okay, 3.5 years.
3.5 years of competing on the circuit. Yeah.
Wow. And one of the things I know about you is that you are over 20 years in this sport.
Yeah. Started from a young age, was brought up in a very sport-oriented family. You know, mom played basketball and my father used to do judo himself. He also represented Malta. And so from a young age, was immersed in a lot of different sports along with my brother and sister. And then sort of judo presented itself as the way that I would eventually engage with professional sports eventually. And so after many years of balancing that out with, the limiting factor that we have as Maltese athletes, which is balancing it out with work or with studies, I got my opportunity to compete in a more professional manner over the last 3.5 years, which ended last May. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned that the Maltese athletes have this issue. I suppose that's really a pretty collective issue, but I want you to kind of expand a little bit on it. Is that a real struggle in Malta for athletes
Um,
to?
I, yeah, it is a struggle because I look back and I was very fortunate in a lot of ways for circumstances to be how they were for me to pursue judo. And why do I say that? Because um, to compete at the level that I did whilst balancing professional job as well as studies isn't very feasible because you have to be immersed in high level training camps and competitions throughout the year. And so I had to obviously postpone being able to chase judo because financially there wasn't the support to do it when I was younger in that manner. And I say that because it never really turned me away from the sport itself. I almost knew deep down that it would be a matter of time until I'd managed to do it. And after many years of doing the best we could, we got that opportunity to continue doing the best we could, but in a more professional manner. And we had our chance, which came at, I wouldn't say a big expense, but a lot of self-sacrifice and postponing what we perceive from a social point of view or social standard, what life should be, because in Malta we are edged towards engaging in our professionalism from a younger age. Once you leave university, you start your job and whatnot. It's sort of this wave that's constantly pushing you. And to go against that, you feel the constant push and you have to be reminded why you're doing it, And when it came to judo and the humbling sport that it is, it's nothing short of what you have to deal with on a regular basis, facing adversity. So it was, in the grand scheme of things, it was something very small to make this sacrifice to compete at that level. And I couldn't be more grateful that I chose to do that. So.
Indeed, Isaac, and you said a humbling sport. It's multiple ways how we can understand it. One of the humbling parts of it, when you get slammed to the ground, it's literally humbling, and another and another part is that over years I met and worked with and did events with different niches of professional athletes, And I do understand that this hard work we are putting as athletes every single day by even having this sports as a way of life, it's really a humbling experience because you understand that the rent is due every day. There is no there is no handouts in that sense, and you may be rewarded by some kind of a favor in a referee side or some all the things happens, but from a mastery side of point is there is no handouts in that. So my applause, my friend, for your career and what you did in sports. Now there is something that connects me and Isaac on another aspect of mastery, and that's not directly about sport. So we are both our mentees for Dr. Zuzana Faitzak. And Dr. Zuzana Faitzak for me was a pivotal moment in my transformation and changing the life I was in. And she bring a lot of congruence for my growth. Now, when I realized that that's how we connected, by the way, that when I realized that Isaac is a professional athlete and he went through the teachings of Dr. Zuzana, I was congruent and sure that we will be on very, very, very even emotional understanding about why we choose the paths we choose. So Isaac, may you share your journey with Dr. Zuzana Faitzak, and that let it be our starting point for all the podcast topic we're gonna discuss further.
So that's a very adequate way of saying it. Like uh, Dr. Zhu is such a, and I like the word that you said, pivotal point in my life and having met her, and I can understand that her work brings about that sort of change for people. And it's funny because in meeting Dr. Zhu, I look back and in a period that I would have previously perceived as the closing of a door, which was the coming to the end of this professional sport career, and this Olympic qualification period, I now realize that there was a door involved, but it was rather than a closing, it was an opening, and Dr. Zhu was kind enough to keep me in line with that door, and she really embodies what it means to have a career that is about giving to others, and so in my instance, it was amazing how we met at such a particular point where everything was coming to this end of career in sport. And so it was very graceful how, looking back, because as you know, Karolis, sports is a very harsh profession to end. You sacrifice so much in aim of this dream that for most athletes, as in most arts, as in most walks of life, it comes to a brief end. And when you no longer are able to relate to yourself as an athlete, you start to question, well, what am I if I'm not that athlete? And this happens to people in all walks of different levels of sports. Michael Phelps went through a very serious depression after he became the most successful ever Olympian in terms of his medal tally. And he went through a severe depression, not knowing what he was outside of the swimming pool. And so when I look back in the way that slowly with Dr. Zhu's work, I started becoming more aware of the importance in realizing one's being and sports being an extension of that. And so slowly, as I started working with her, there was less pressure in how results came about and more importance to this underlying fundamental view of life in its entirety. And when you suddenly do that, you allow your body to do what it was trained to do all along, because you're no longer doubting yourself, you no longer have this pressure. And so I remember my last competition right? Because I started off in 2022 in a very good ranking position relatively, no Maltese athlete had been there before. And I knew that I had another 2 years, just under 2 years for qualification. I was really gearing up, and this, part of me realized, well, this is going to happen, like this is it. This is the first point. And I remember when I got those first, few wins and competition points, I started to say to myself, okay, now here's the momentum. But slowly, you know, things come about in a way to remind you that there's something underlying that you can't see, and you start to realize that what we take as being circumstance is actually just a reflection of what's in ourselves. And so towards the end of my career, then I was not in a good position to qualify. I had lost a lot of points. I had lost a lot of recurring competitions. I'd gone through a lot of injuries up until the last moment qualifying. I was dealing with very bad illness in back-to-back competitions, and one injury after the other, and yet I still continued until the very end. My last competition was at the World Championships in Dubai, and by all means it should have been the most pressured event, because if there was ever a chance to go to the Olympics, it was all on this one competition. And yet I just remember walking out to this fight feeling like a kid again. There was this almost, I look back and dare I say, floating of me heading towards the competition area, because I didn't have this sense of uneasiness or this sense of pressure, right? And so Dr. Zhu's work, which we started only 10 days before that fight, already kicked in, because that's how much there was suppressed in that sense, So I'm very grateful to having, even though the competition itself, from a result point of view, didn't give me enough points to qualify for the Olympics, I look back and I say, how amazing is it that I got to experience again what it meant to compete without this pressure that I put on myself.
It's really so beautiful to hear what you are saying, because many people in this world, and especially in the professional sports, are driven by an ambition that is fueled by ego and by unconscious need for validation, for worthiness, and so much more. And I know, I feel how easy it was for you when you realized that burden you were carrying with yourself. It just, yeah, interesting. So, would you? I will ask it this way. What would you say to everyone who are now chasing all the greatness? Like, what would you wish for them?
Yeah, that's a a quite deep question straight away, Carlos. I appreciate going into the deep end straight away. So, looking back, what I'd wish for them to do, or what I'd hope for them to do, is just to take this breath and look around you and realize in so many ways that life is wanting you to succeed. Because when I look back, right, even though it was only and I say only with respect to all athletes out there, it was only in a sports point of view. When I look back, because I tried and I gave my all towards this goal, life literally gave me circumstances encouraging me to go for it, And I say that because you mentioned ego, right? Which is this veil that we see the world with that doesn't allow us to see things for what they are. But even looking back at the coach that I had in the last 2.5 years of competing, he was the best coach I could have asked for. You know, Malta never had a coach like him before, and he just happened to be signed in the last 2.5 years. That would be my last 2.5 years competing. And I almost look back and I say to myself, well, you know, like, that's amazing, you know, that all of a sudden we have this coach that brought this incredible professionalism and this whole new system for us to realize what it meant to be at the top level of sports. And he was what brought out these results in us. But it was our willingness within. And why do I say to realize that? Because in looking back and realizing that it was my own hard work that brought about the circumstances that eventually led to this coach, you start to realize, well, hey, hard work gets rewarded. Maybe not when you think, maybe not the manner that you think, but something comes out of it. And I say that also with respect to the fact that I look back and the greatest things that I got out of judo weren't even the results themselves. They were so beyond the results, you know. And so I say towards all athletes there that are still competing to try and have this awareness that what you're doing right now will benefit you so much, no matter what results you get, because you are striving to become the best version of yourself, even if that's in a discipline. You know, like you are showing this gratitude towards life, and life will reciprocate in kindness because you are trying to become that best version of yourself.
I think it's beautiful. And I'm so happy you said that the hard work sometimes pays off in ways that you don't understand. Sometimes it's the ways that you least expect. And you know, I always had that hard work ethic on myself, and that wasn't coming from the best origins, but it did served a purpose in my life. And I can say that the mentality of a hard work ethic is literally life changing. If you are capable of being that hard worker, that dedicated person who is present in a moment. So you know, if you're in training session, you are in training session and you're giving it all. You are fully focused. You're fully aware. You're fully here to execute and understand what is being given to you. You know, by the best coach, like in your case, by the best coach that you have available right now. And that brings so much humbleness and humility to life, and it transcends the sport. It goes into your family, it goes into relationships, it goes into self relationship, it goes into business, into career. It's like everywhere. So myself, like, I have no doubt you have this internal gratitude for what sport gave you. And you know, I myself, without even being on the top level of the game, you know, because I chose different path, but I'm still so grateful for the sports. It not was, it is the fundamental part of my reality.
I like how you said that, Karolis. I think it's really elegant in how you accept that the hard work ethic doesn't always come from the best of places, but in itself it presents such an important value. Because when I see what work you're doing and the way that you're trying to reach out to people and bring about this change, I see this awareness that you have this tool that can be used in two ways. And now you're no longer using it in something that's being held within you. And suddenly your hard work ethic is allowing this work to become an extension of yourself, you know, like, and bring about this change that you said that does manifest in our relationships with others, in our with our kids, you know, in all of society. And I think that's what it's all about at the end of the day, and realizing that so much is up for grabs if we're willing to look out for it and others experience it through us, you know. So
Yeah, we are sharing. I call it law of nature. Even that's what we do right now is the law of nature. It's a co-creation, it's a collaboration, it's the sharing point where my story will influence someone else's day, and that day might influence their whole life, right? It's like being there for your friend, who is going through hard times. Like you never know what people think inside of them, what they are ready to commit towards, and just being able to listen, being able to understand, and it's life changing. So when we're talking about people who are highly ambitious, when they dedicated all their lives for something that is tangible to a degree, like when you said that the part of where when the competition ends up, what happens next. Look, like how big is the percentage of NBA players who go broke after they finish their careers? How many fighters, like literally, going all their lives, getting hit and hit other people and just consume all that damage, all that training, all this time, all these camps, time without the family, time, without experiencing anything else, just the bag and just the mats and just bag and mats. And then they end up without knowing what to do. And I know some people who've been professionals, and they coached others and etc., and the business didn't went good, and they working as bouncers. Like that is heartbreaking, literally. Like we do not have this infrastructure. That's why maybe there is no that exponential growth in professional athleticism, where we have this stable growth. But I suppose that the thing is that if we would have the infrastructure to help all these athletes to transition, like that would be supported on from even the government side. Let's even take that into account. If we could like put that into their minds that, look, these athletes end up somewhere, they can maintain their legacy of what they did without any attachment to that competing, but just by sharing what you're doing right now. And if we can get you paid for that, would that be bad? No.
Definitely, definitely. I think what's very on point with what you said is it's true, and you know, I mentioned Phelps earlier, who managed to find his way out of this depression, with the grace of life, but there's a lot of people that don't, especially in the harsh sports that require so much sacrifice for a very few seconds of glory. Like judo is a very underpaid sport in 95% of countries, and it is a sport where, and I humbly say this, you have to literally break your body every single day training, because there can't be a single aspect of you that's weak, because this is the ultimate fight. Like you said, you are going to get thrown on the floor. You have to have the endurance of a runner, you have to have the strength of a power lifter, the flexibility of a gymnastics, you have to have the mental focus of a chess player, and everything happens in a split second. And I look back very grateful that it was as hard as it was, because I almost dare say now, problems I meet in life are relatively easy compared to it. And I don't say that to bring down what life is, but when you, in an egoic manner, as I was, chase sport for the results to give you this value, this self-worth, you can end up in really dark places. And looking back at how I had nothing to complain about, like literally, I look back like I was one of the cases where, because I studied, because I had a job lined up after, like everything was really smooth for me. Okay, it's true, it took away from the results in judo, but I know athletes that come from poor countries where, because they just had a bad day at the Olympics, like their plan to, make a living, which is their one shot. That's it. And so I say this with respect towards the parts that they're going to have after sport, because obviously my experience in sport isn't the same experience they'll have. They have it much harsher. At the same time, what sport means to them isn't what sport meant to me. And that I think I always deep down knew that in chasing this, I was always going to manage to become a better version of myself, even if that meant going through this ditch of chasing it in an egoic manner, right? But why do I say that? For some people, it's that, like you said, rent is due. It is their complete livelihood. And so, I mean, Karolis, we don't need to beat around the bush. Like stuff that before I used to be very, let's say, apprehensive about. But for example, something that's well known in sport is doping. Like for example, across world sports, there's this high level of doping, whereas there's disregard for the human body, because there's a statistics that athletes would rather die by the age of 40 and win the Olympics, right, than to have a long, healthy life. This is like an actual statistic. I'm not sure where I read it, but they'd prefer to, because that's how synced in it, that's how much it means to them. Now, I could never understand that, because you're compromising so much of your literal life, your own health, to do that. But when sport means putting food on the table, who am I to judge what you will and will not do? Obviously, I'm not saying by any means that you should. But I think it is when you've traveled enough and you've seen the circumstances that some of these athletes live in, you start to have a gratitude towards your own circumstances, no matter the lack of results in that. But you realize what hardship drives them to do this to themselves. And I think that's why, for some people, it's much easier to realize how sport is an extension of yourself. And no matter what, you're going to have people around you that love you, no matter what your result is, right? But for some people, it's not, because the sort of lens that they're seeing everything in is so skewed by thinking, well, this is it for them. And obviously that brings in a lot of otherworldly manners into it. But the reason I say that is because there has to be this understanding that the walks of life that we meet in different sports is always going to be different. And as such, they should be treated different. And this is hopefully one way to bring more awareness to the fact that there is a lot of hardship in one way or another in these athletes that are pursuing such a level of sport.
You're touching a deep needle point here, and I might sound unpopular on this case, but I'm not here to be liked. That's not about this, and all the journey we have, right, in life. Look at it. It's like it's something always happening without exceptions. Something always happens, and you right now you stopped with your judo career, and but there's something happening. You're going somewhere, and now you're on a podcast. Tomorrow maybe you're gonna be again on a podcast. It's not it's like all this circle. And how important, like, I know that's important for you, but how important is to really know why you chasing what you're chasing? Like, if you could know that, that's where emotional intelligence, that's where understanding what trauma does, understanding what conditioning does, it's so deep, it's so vital for what we are. And people, it's not even about economy. It's not even about, the rent is due. It's about, do you know why you do what you do? Do you know why you are the way you are? It's so, some people live all their lives. Like we know our grandparents, our maybe some parents or something. We know that, they don't even ask those questions. They just live with what they got. And I'm not saying it's entirely bad. Like, I mean, that's not fair. Like, on yourself, it's not giving a chance to look in the mirror and say, like, look, you are always about it. You're always chasing about it, and you are just all you think about yourself, that you are good because you are achieving, because you making money, because you are winning the championships and getting all that recognition. Is that the only reasons why you're good?
Yeah, that's so cool.
And Isaac, I think if we would have this answer in the beginning of our journey, like when we start, let's just think about it. Let's just dream this ideal scenario for a second. If we would have this clarity, the mastery of the art would be out of curiosity, creativity, and courage, not about from some sort of a deep hole that you are trying to fill in, that is just a void, eating and eating all that attention you're feeding it to. Isn't that would bring more opportunities to earn the money, to get the support, to be open for the world? I believe there is so many people who would support these athletes. All we need is to just create that some sort of infrastructure, and I'm always working with it. The Sports Lodge project is. It's not without the reason. I understand. It was all my life. Like, it was all my life. I was surviving just because I was training. The only reason at certain point in my life was I survived because I was training. So it's not about an achievement. It's not about a trophy. It's not about being some sort of a master of something. It was about being for myself there, showing up again and again and again when I didn't want it to show up. And so how many people out there is literally showing up for themselves? They don't even realize why they're showing up.
Very true. And what you're mentioning now, Karolis, I think we don't even need to delve into professional sports to see it. And I'm
Yeah.
sure you meet them all the time. There is a culture nowadays where people feel so suppressed in the rest of their day that they need to take it out in some form of physical activity. And that's not to say that the physical activity isn't good. We've been over some aspects to your work, and like we've talked about, there is such scientific evidence of how beneficial, at a biological and chemical level, this physical activity is for you. But the why is not there. There is no sense of asking, why do I need to, at the end of the day, take out all of this stress in physical activity? And so why is that important to ask? Because it's like you said, you're no longer doing it as a means to an end, but from a point of view where now you've become creative. It's an expression. I can do it because I can. I can do it because it opens up more doors. You're not doing it because if you don't manage to sleep well at night. And I'm sure that both you and I have had our fair share of going through periods where it is literally the driving force in us that if you don't train, like I remember, there was a period where, from a sort of body point of view, my strength and my other attributes as an athlete were at their highest because if I didn't feel completely dead after training, my mental stigma around the training session was it wasn't good enough, right? That's literally what I used, the narrative that I created. And you might think that that's beneficial to you, but in the long term, what that does is it creates a lot of injuries. It creates a lot of mental stress. It creates a lot of tension, not only in training, but once you're home from training. And why do I say that? Because that's exactly what I didn't have. I didn't have that why, you know? And I thought that this was going to fuel me on my journey. Don't get me wrong. Looking back, I wouldn't change a thing about it, because only it going wrong so many times that I realize, hey, this isn't the way to go about it, you know? And you have to accept that. You can't create this inner conflict with what's already happened, you know? You just need to look back and realize, you know, I might be 31 years old, but I have the learning curve of an infant, you know, and I probably will for some time. And I think that that's it, Karolis. There is this deep need to ask why we feel the need to do stuff. And once that becomes clear, if you're able to answer it in an honest manner, suddenly a lot of weight is lifted off your shoulders. And there's an expression that I once came across. It said, you know, that mountain that you're carrying, well, you were meant to climb it, you know, meaning that, you know, all that weight doesn't need to be there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So great saying is that nobody asked you to carry that mountain, but it ends up being in our baggage. It ends up being in our baggage. Like, you know, it's beautiful, Isaac, that we are on this call because look. It's not every day you meet people who are going so deep within them to realize what they are and why they are, why they've been the way they've been, right? And not not desocializing themselves in the way of it. Because, you know, for me as well, there was a time when that internal clarity felt like burden. Like it felt like it was ruining my life to a point, right? And that was ruining the old life, right? That was ruining the ruins, ruining the ruins, man. Ruining the ruins. And all that dedication that I put in towards self-reflection mastery is really, like you said, you know, I wouldn't change anything about my life that's been, because the depth I can go down and up is literally a consequence of all what I've been through, and you know, what I had to do, what decisions I had to make, what realizations, how many times I had to look in the mirror and say things and do things, and you know, that's a gift. That's a gift. I think it's called a gift wrapped in disguise, something like that. So yeah.
On that point, don't get me wrong, I still, by all means, I go through a lot of periods where I'm understanding of this like collapse of everything around me, this external world, which I only now look at as an appreciation, because you can't really change, or rather change, gain further insight to what's inside of you without this bit of collapse. Because at the end of the day, the understanding we have of everything that there is around us is only a reflection of our own internal state. And so it's normal that the deeper that you go and the more you realize it's there, suddenly you have these walls collapsing around you. So by all means, I'm in no place to say that I don't feel that sometimes I need to be away from everything and everyone, because it's still hard to maintain relationships. In fact, it's no secret that I haven't been near a judo mat since I stopped competing, just because I know so much of what I'm doing is connected with the sport. And I don't say that with any negative emotion towards the sport. No, it's more so with appreciation, because I'm not in a phase in my life where I can be there and truly appreciate the sport for what it did for me, because I'm still uncovering the parts of me that previously held me back in life that are connected with it, you know. And so if I am to go back eventually to the sport in some capacity as a coach or whatever, I'll let it happen at the moment it's meant to, like everything else that's happened. But I did have to stay away, and that's even in, you know, I mean, I love the sport so much, and I still have a lot of friends. I'm so grateful for the amount of friends that I made, and for the majority of my life I was alone traveling, completely alone, without a coach, traveling and competing across the world. And I made so many beautiful friendships, and I have so much appreciation for the way that so many countries and teams accepted me as one of them, in respect for this, I guess, discipline I had and appreciation. And maybe they just like the fact that I was grateful for the smallest thing, if that was a training session with someone or this. And even those friendships I've not, I wouldn't say I've put on hold, but I haven't immersed myself in that environment again, because I think that when you realize how deep this stuff goes, you have to give it what it's due to really go about appreciating who the essence of you as a being are. So yeah.
I think that's perfectly normal to have this experience what you're defining, and there shouldn't be any abnormality in that, Isaac. And turbulence is part of life. It's everything in everything. And uh, I'm not being able to say today that I'm getting tired of people or tired of something, but I've been getting to that point where, look, I need to rest from myself, like where I need to just do something basic, where I need just to sit down and enjoy the grass, enjoy the river, without any intellectualizations or emotional observations, because that was so challenging. All those things that is just coming up and coming up, and when you open that Pandora box, it's just not closing. It's just not closing. And you end up with all the dictionary of your life, and like, okay, what do I need to do with it right now every single time? So
It's hard to switch off, Karolis, because there's this similarity, I guess, in our characters, that we associate so much of who we are with this hard worker. And I look back and I say to myself, well, I worked that hard to achieve something in judo. I'm not going to dedicate the same thing to my own life, you know, like it was almost automatic. But like you said, you know, sometimes you just need to put your feet up and watch a movie. I mean, it was hilarious. A few weeks ago, I was on a call with Dr. Susanna, and you know, she was very appreciative of the way that I approached her program and the work that we did. And so the way that my life was changing, she made me aware, was a reflection of how much work I was putting into it. But it got to the point where I was working so hard. She was like, "Okay, honey, like now just take a break, you know, like this sort of, just you know, like put on a comedy movie and like chill." And I guess it's easy to lose touch with the fact that at all times how we were in chasing results was just an extension of who we were back then, and what's going to happen now is just an extension of who we are now, you know, so we don't really need to do much. So yeah.
I found that the hard work ethic is, it's not about. I think the problem is where you are doing that thing when you shouldn't be doing it. Like, it's when you are present with your family and you go deep there inside, and you just, you're not listening even to them anymore. You're just grinding something, and it's all this craving of information, of freedom. That I think that's coming to the craving of freedom. And for me was the realization of that, I'm not a prisoner. Look, the liberation is what we are. It's just the mind that puts all those barrels, those ceilings, those cages around us. and it's ended up that we are not present, and that's the problem. That was always the problem. You're not present, and if you would be present, if you would notice, if you would listen, if you would feel, you would realize, like, you know. So for me, the biggest change was that how to use that hard work ethic was the exactly what you said, the movie watching. Even during the times now, like when I'm going into all these intellectualizations and in a work and creation and feeling observation, and I'm just watching it without this big emotional turmoil on me, that I must do something, I need to kind of grind it and understand it, so it's becomes small and tiny, so every bit is clear. And now I'm just happy that some things are not clear. And when we started the conversation today, when you asked how I am, I said I'm getting a lot of clarity. And I want to say something about this. I don't find safety in clarity anymore. I've been seeking safety in clarity. Now, what I found is if I can find safety in uncertainty, there is nothing anymore in my way why I should feel unsafe.
That's it. That's very true.
Literally. Like,
Very, yeah, it's true. That's very true. I love that, Karolis. I think that's a recurring theme that I keep on being reminded of. It's that this inner peace that you get, that I talked about, that previously I didn't have an awareness of during sport, because I thought to myself that, if I lost in competition, I've lost in life. If I've won in competition, I've won in life. When you realize that no matter what you do in sport, it's just an extension of your being, that doesn't really bring about a happiness, right? It's like you said, there's no sort of, well, okay, that's it, like we can be jolly. It's almost a neutrality, like you are neutral, you are sort of just in the middle. And now it's almost like, okay, if I go out and I lose, that's it, and if I go out and I win, that's it, like it's not a happiness that you've lost, for example, by all means, this isn't like, I'm not trying to send out a message out there that you can go out and lose and you're going to be like, well, like this and that, and like
it's not about ignorance. It's not about ignorance.
it's not about ignorance. It's just an impartialness to the result, which is, like you said, I am not connected to anything that can shake me up, no matter what it is. I'm sort of impartial to it. And that also doesn't come with ignorance. It's the opposite. It's with an understanding of a bigger picture, and that bigger picture comes to people in different ways. For some, it can be their family, looking back and realizing that no matter what, you have a family that's going to love you and doesn't care how you do. For others, it comes from the country they're from. They want to compete, they want to travel and compete, but they're always looking forward to being back home. It comes in different shapes and sizes, but essentially it is just life itself for everyone. Like it is this bigger picture of everything. I mean, I look back and for myself, it could be that I was lucky enough that at all times, and don't get me wrong, it was something that I was quite blind to more often than not when I lost, but I was surrounded by people that appreciated just who I was as a person in sport. They didn't like me because of my results. I didn't have results to be proud of in that big, pond of things. I mean, I was competing and training alongside Olympic medalists and Olympic champions and the top, who medaled like 10 times more than I ever dreamed of. You know what I mean? And the respect that I had as a person was outside of those, you know, and that in itself is an understanding where I look back and I realize to myself, hey, hold on, you know, this whole time I was chasing results, but the people that I had around me that liked me being around them didn't care about my results, you know, like, and that was everywhere that I went. And so that brings, like you said, this sort of, I wouldn't say truth to, you know, to your view of things, but it's like, really, what do I be worried about? You know, because my very being in itself is something that, you know, that is secure, you know, my very being, you know, like, so yeah.
It's you said a couple things that I've been working through a lot in 2024. So love from a family, and I'm looking from a perspective of projects. I'm pretty ambitious entrepreneur, like globalistically ambitious, because when you feel that something, like when you find an innovation that you know that it can help world to challenge certain problem, you don't keep it in a state, right? You don't keep it in one state, you don't keep it in a village, you go and spread it. And you know I I was already feeling very strong about myself that I don't depend on someone's support, because I understand how human behavior works, and that people sometimes, those who hate becomes your followers, and those who are followers become your haters, and it's not about you, right? Yes, your actions has an influence, but still it's the reaction. Someone who is emotionally observant, they will not get into these ventures of hating and loving. They love it as it is, right? And for me, was the only person that I had who always supported me, like, and I knew that I felt that I knew that she was true to me, like, she was honest to me, was my mother. Like, no matter how crazy the idea would sound, no matter what, what I would do, and how bad things were for me at certain times, she was always, having this belief in me. And I didn't even realize that how much of that attention and power I attached to her belief. And there was a moment in 2024 when we experienced the big challenges, and it ended up that information leaked to my mother, and she called me, and she's an emotional lady, right? And she basically spoke out that she don't believe in what I do, and that hit me, man. I was like, what? Like, I felt betrayed immediately, like that. And then I was like, okay, and my psyche is seeing events like this, and I connected. Bam, that's betrayal trauma. Like, okay, what I'm trying to control here, because I'm trying to control something here. I'm trying to control trust. So instead of believing completely unconditionally in myself without a complete need of anyone's validation, I leaked that energy towards my mother, and I had this safe spot that there is one person in this planet who always believes in me. And when she said that she don't believe, I said thank you. I said thank you for liberating me from any kind of a validation. And she said this not because she don't believe me at all. No, she felt scared because the challenge was pretty big, and she felt scared about me, about the family, I'm having, and all that. And I was sitting there confident as I am, I was sure that, this challenge is just like an exercise. I look to things like an exercise. And if I can be very conscious of me doing the exercise, practicing the throw, practicing the kick, practicing the hit, practicing the rep, by the breath, the motion. If I'm conscious of it, I will learn it. I will go through it. I have no single doubt in that. And that moment when I realized, like, look, I'm putting this responsibility of believing in me onto someone. For what reason? I'm putting this responsibility of loving the relationships. Look, I have this statement that most couples have selfish love. It's selfish love and it's unconscious. Why? Because we come and we meet someone and we get something out of them what we need. Same with sports. We go out in sports, we place some sort of a mountain on our shoulders, and then we end up chasing something that we don't even realize, and then it's still void in us. There is still lag. There's always another thing and another thing and another thing, and you're just not content with what you are. So and I realized, the last year was, we are not without the challenges, brother. Here, we are with the challenges. It's just I built this internal mechanism that every challenge is a gift.
That's so true. That's so true, Carlos. I guess I always respected judo as a sport because what you spoke about now is that you are essentially alone in life, right? And that you can't bank on what's going to make you succeed being anything of any sort of relationship or that's outside of you. This is why, like, I loved that in judo, right? There was this extremely scary and yet the most brilliant feeling that you can imagine when you're in this stadium of, like when you're fighting in Paris and there's like tens of thousands of people, or in France and you're fighting. There's this one moment where you walk out, and when you walk out, there's your coach walking alongside you, right? And the moment you reach your competition mat, your coach sits down and your feet touch the mat. And there's this brilliant sensation like now it's all you. And this is it. Because at all times, it is only you. Like I love that in judo. There is this domain that no one else, no spectator, no coach is in when you're in the fight. It is you alone. That's all it is at all times. And why do I say that? Because, like, I've spoken about this before. We haven't touched on it in the podcast, specifically. But by all means, I had everything on the outside in terms of the attributes that could have allowed me to get a lot more results than I ever got, right? Whenever it came to training, and the discipline behind it, everyone around me recognized what a talent I was and how much I devoted to it. I had many athletes telling me, even, like top level Olympic medalists telling me like, like you're an animal, like you're a beast, because when I fought them in training, there was no sense of stress. There was just, like this relaxation of allowing my body to do whatever it did. But the moment it came to competition, that's the moment where all of a sudden, all it is about what's inside of you. And no word that your coach tells you, no words that your family tells you, no words that any other athlete tells you carries on with you in the fight. The only voice you hear in the fight, the only thing you hear in the fight, you don't even perceive the crowd, is yourself at all times. And I remember for the longest time, it was this self-doubt, this fear, this non-presence that took away this capability that my body had and was trained for. And why do I say that? Because it's almost as if we don't realize at all times in everything that we do, we are picking up so much in daily life, right? And when you're in a rigorous Olympic training camp and you're training for years on end, your body, you don't realize, is capable of so much. I mean, we're talking about something that at all times is keeping us alive and we don't know how. You know, its brilliance is just untapped in so many different ways because we limit it. And when I look back in how I was in judo, at all times I was my own biggest limit because I had no idea how amazing the work that I had done was, you know, and in fact, in training, there was no thought, there was no stress. And at all times, it was like, you know, sort of, I remember in training camps, my coach, you know, just telling me, you know, like, all you need to do now, all you need to do is just do exactly what you did in the training camp, in competition. You know, like, he's like, that's literally it. You don't need to change anything, you have it all. And yet, because the internal narrative I had in competition, because of all the stress, was different, I didn't allow my body to do that. And it's fascinating because the few times that I look back, and I say few in relative to all the competitions, where I did, it was, I wouldn't even say hard. You don't even realize what you're doing. That's how brilliant it is. That's how automatic, that's how capable your body is. And in a sport like judo, it has to be. You know, in a
Yeah.
sport like judo, the moment you're suddenly engaging in a narrative with yourself, you're already two steps behind the opponent. You know, it's like nothing, you know, it takes 1 millisecond for that knockout to come, and all of a sudden you're on the ground. And I remember when I started the work with Dr. Zhu, it was right before the European Championships. I had just come from a really bad wrist injury, right? An extremely bad wrist injury. And that wrist injury, they told me, well, you know, you can forget competing again. It's impossible. You know, like, just, you know, it's done. You have 3 more months of competing. This takes 5 months to recover because it's really bad. You're not going to be able to do it. And I remember that was the initial examination. And then when they had a further look, they said, oh, there's a small chance, but you're going to be in a lot of pain. And so I took that chance. And I remember I had started to work with Dr. Susanna back then. And it was right before the European Championships. And I had to do 2.5 weeks without any training, you know, physically or anything like that. Very little training, what I could. And at this European Championships, I came against this Ukrainian fighter who is one of the most physically strong in our whole category. He was just, the guy was just an animal, you know, like, he was physically, there was very few people that were stronger than him. And I hadn't trained in God knows how long, you know, like, physically or this, I was really behind. I mean, I remember doing a bit of training with my coach like one day before the competition, and I was like, I can't even fight my coach. How the heck am I going to fight this guy, you know? And there was this brilliant moment where, before I stepped onto the mat, I had started the work with Dr. Zhu of disidentifying myself from my thoughts, where there's this massive arena and the lights were on me, and I was about to step out, and this voice came in my head. You know, they're like, hey, you don't, this voice said, you don't stand a chance. You know, like, you fought this guy, you know how strong he is, he's beaten you before. And your wrist and this, and it started. And I just remember, like, taking myself out and saying, okay, I get it, you're here. Now, I'm going to go out and fight. If you want, you can stay on the sidelines and watch, but you're not coming with me onto the mat. And I just remember saying that, like, this pure disidentification of the thought. I just said, you're not joining me on the mat. If you want to stay, you can watch from the sideline. And when I went out to fight, it was the most relieving feeling of being completely present. And all of a sudden, I didn't need to be in the peak of my form or trained completely in this, because I had years of doing this. I allowed myself to be present. And all of a sudden, I gave my body the go ahead to do what it knew it could do all along, you know? And I remember being completely present. And this guy, like, we ended up doing like a 3.5 minute fight. So in judo, the fights are 4 minutes. So this guy beat me in the last 30 seconds of the fight only. This is one of the strongest competitors in the world. And here I was fighting with him in the European Championship, going neck to neck with him, at times throwing him around. And it was like stepping off the mat and saying, that's all it took. Like that's all it took, that one thing. And it's brilliant because I think that this same thing applies to so much of life. Like we are capable of so much more than we realize in handling situations. And there's just this narrative that we think that we can't. And yet the moment that we're present, like everything is just so easy.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful and so powerful, man. All I can say is that you can understand it by only experiencing it.
It's true. It's true. It's very true. Like the words don't point to how the actual thing feels. They're only a sign of it. Like, but I think people are doing this all the time. Like without even being aware that they are. Sometimes it might be in the way that they come up with a creative solution just because they're like present, thinking that there was a problem at work they couldn't solve and this. Like, but the actual feeling itself, this like state of flow is just it's beautiful, like it is. There's nothing else going on in the world except what you're doing.
I think the biggest difference of what you said right now is are you conscious of your flow? Are you conscious of you? Like not the association of you, but you, like, right? I think that's the difference between the standard way of a flow, because you can get into flow by driving a bicycle, right? But it's end up like a tunnel vision.
Yeah, that's it. That's very it. I mean, I remember because, to be fair, when you're in, and this is, I'm sure, Carlos, you've been in these situations, when you're in a fight, your body is in such a state of motion, no matter what you're doing. And why do I say no matter what I'm doing? Because now I mentioned an instance where I was in a flow state, right? There are other instances where, like, it doesn't go as well, and all of a sudden you're in fight or flight, and like you're stuck and you're frozen. But in all moments, there's so much of a chemical process going on in your body that more often than not, you don't remember the whole thing. Like it's literally like the same way that we forget moments of pure tension and these massive problems in the past because of this chemical process that they bring about. And sports is a lot like that, because at the end of the day, there is this mechanism in you that is sort of putting you in overdrive to perform, right? Like, it comes out without even thinking about it. And when that happens, the best parts of what make you a good athlete, you can't really even say that you're responsible for them, because you're, like you said, you're just all of a sudden witnessing it. In fact, more often than not, you look back on tapes of yourself fighting and you're like, I did that, like it's brilliant. You're like, I don't even remember doing that, I have no idea that happened. So yeah.
Yeah, adrenaline is a powerful thing. It's very very powerful. Like
Yeah.
it can black out. It can give strength, and it can remove the pain.
Yeah.
It's very powerful. Isaac, so I believe that it's not the last time we having a call. This was about more about your journey, and I do believe that other calls will be about sharing the expertise and sharing the experience for specific topics. So I'm really happy if we go by that road. Now, for the end of the video, is there a message that one day this video might be something as an asset? People may start looking into it and looking back to where we started with all the thing, the sports lodge and our journeys. And what would be the message you would say to these millions of people that can potentially see us in the future, sharing the knowledge and experience?
I think my message would be to, even if you don't like it, embrace where you are right now, because it is likely exactly where you're meant to be, you know. So, and looking back, it's going to serve its purpose like everything else does.
Sir. That's it. That's the one. That's the one. Literally. Thank you, Isaac. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. It was
That
a
was
pleasure.
very that was
I know
very strong conversation.
yeah, I know you know, it's great working with you, and I know today we jumped around a lot, but there's such an enthusiasm working with you, and I know that this isn't the last call, and hopefully, in the calls to come, we can dial in on some very important aspects of stuff that needs to be translated from one sports career into everyday life. So yeah, it was great to
Indeed.
work. This was
Thank you, Isaac. Thank you, and thank you everyone who watched. All the best. Looking forward to see you next time.